Hello and welcome to Masters of Divinity. I'm your moderator, JP. I am currently aboard the Starship Enterprise EDD. Enterprise D? Right?
Yes.
They're practicing social distancing right now, so I can't really ask anybody. Obviously. I don't know. Trying to be as corny as possible, folks. I'm here as always with Father Chuck.
Hey, aloha, all that stuff.
I'm also here with Matt.
Yay!
Matt's finally here.
Not as always.
Hey, does not have coronavirus.
I think Father Fun's been on the podcast more than me.
Yeah. And speaking of whom, Father Fun is also here. Hello, Father Fun. Welcome back.
Hey guys, glad to be here.
Well, I mean, he is almost the Reverend Canon Fun.
Okay,
that's right.
I need to know, why do you keep? This is something that's happening in our messenger groups. Why do you keep calling Father Fun Canon Fun?
He should answer that.
I'm switching jobs soon.
Okay.
We just sold our house and we're moving to Topeka. In August, I will take on the job of canon to the ordinary, which is a position. It's kind of like an executive officer for the bishop. The bishop is the ordinary, and so the canon to the ordinary is like the kind of assistant to the bishop. Canon, CANON, which is the way that we spell like canon law that's related to the church. The church rules are called the canons, not canon, CANNON, like the large piece of artillery, and not however Nick Cannon spells it. I wish I had that pulled up.
That Nick Cannon. Okay, well that's interesting. Topeka, Kansas. I have some friends that I usually hang out with who are from Topeka. They go to a lot of funerals or protest stuff. I'm not really down with that, but I'm not.
One of my parishioners says has a daughter who lives there, and whenever she talks about Topeka, well, not whenever, one time, but I always say this now. Whenever she talks about Topeka, she says it's a goofball city, which it is. I mean, it's definitely like,
yeah.
There's a lot about Topeka that's great, but Michael grew up in Topeka, so married to somebody
really?
from Topeka, and she's happy to be going back. But
okay.
Yeah, it's a goofball city.
Just in case no one picked up on a subtle vein of my sarcasm, I was referring to the Westboro Baptist Church.
Which you called them on the phone.
I used to prank call them
times.
all the time in college. Well, we are gathered here today not to talk about the Westboro Baptist Church. That's another episode.
Wait, that's not why we're here? I was lied to. I only
see you
came
later.
back to talk about that.
Matt's like, I got into this Fred Phelps
guys,
cosplay
I'll
for
see you in
nothing.
another 2 years.
We're actually going to talk about the latest iteration of Star Trek, and that is Star Trek Picard, which came out 6 years ago, right?
Feels like it.
Yeah, back when the quarantine started.
I would say it's 3 extremely troubling news cycles ago, I think. If you've been listening to the podcast for as long as we've been around, you probably know that we're pretty big fans of Star Trek. And we love to talk about it whenever we can. Whatever excuse we can find to talk about Star Trek, we'll do it. And now's the perfect time because we want to talk about Picard, which was a show that we all watched. And we're all anxiously anticipating. So I have to know, I just want to know right off the bat, do any of you think that it lived up to your expectations?
I thought it did, personally, without getting too much into it, because that's what we're going to talk about for the whole episode. When it started, I was pleasantly surprised by how different it felt, while how familiar it felt at the same time. Mm-hmm. So the character immediately felt exactly like I wanted Picard to feel years later, but the show felt like something new and exciting. Now, I will say my feelings shifted a bit toward the end, and I won't say whether fully negative or not, but I will say the end and the beginning had very different effects on me. But when it first started, I was very excited by the fact that it felt like a character I was familiar with, that I loved, but updated in a way that didn't feel cheesy or forced. It felt natural and like it was progressing along with the story, not just trying to rehash stuff we've already been through. Again, the end we're going to get to, but that's how I felt when I started. And as a whole, I will say I enjoyed it. It was fun. I had a good time. I liked it. And I look forward to hopefully more. Cool. So that's my feelings on it.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking that question is because we've spent a good time before Picard was even announced saying, we wish Star Trek would go forward into the future. Like, what does Star Trek look like after The Next Generation, after Voyager, after DS9 and all that stuff? And everyone, and all these shows were coming out, seemed to focus on, like, way before that. And so when Picard was coming out, I was like, oh, now we have something to really look forward to.
Yeah, it definitely lived up. I think it's going to be interesting to hear what Matt has to say about the end because as he was speaking, I was kind of thinking that it was similar to my reaction. When it started, I was really jazzed. I was really excited, and it definitely lived up to that hype when it started.
I was excited about seeing Picard again just because he's a great character and I love seeing the character. So in terms of like what the show was about, I don't know that I had a whole lot of like high expectations over, I just wanted to see that the character of Jean-Luc Picard, like just where he was. Like I was just excited about that. And the show totally delivered in that regard, in the sense that Patrick Stewart was able to jump right back into the character, was able to inhabit the character in a way that reflected, a significant chunk of time. Patrick Stewart embodied the character. It was great. I think he did a good job with the character. I will say that I was less jazzed about the state of Starfleet, even though, as way it's depicted, even though it made sense based off of what we had seen coming before. Like it wasn't completely out of left field to see Starfleet in a kind of a more messed up place. Mm-hmm. I was not initially super jazzed about the new characters, especially. I guess it's been a while, and it shows to how the characters resonated. I don't remember most of their names.
I'll help you.
So remind me of she was sort of his assistant.
Rafi.
What? Raffi, thank you. To see a character like her depicted as though, she's calling him JL. They're trying to depict as though they have like this relationship and this long-standing thing, but that hadn't been shown. And so that to me came across a little forced, that they were like, to me, it was almost like we can't afford the other characters. And so we're just going to write this new one and create sort of the impression that there's this backstory. That I don't know, I just didn't feel that it was a real organic backstory. It felt like it was a written in backstory. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel natural. So it was a little bit disjointed for me. And I felt that way about a lot of the new characters when they first were introduced. I came to like all of them as the show progressed. It was just the way they were introduced felt a little jagged. I will say that overall, the whole show, the one character that to me is MVP that took the whole thing away was Data. I think Brent Spiner being able to step right back into that role after all this time, especially in the finale, was really, really, really something amazing to see. Yeah. And for a character that's so deeply beloved in the franchise as Data, to give him the story they gave him, and for him to, I wasn't expecting him to be as big a part of it as he turned out to be, and that was really something special, I think.
I don't want to comment on anybody in real life as far as human beings aging, and I think that's fine. But as far as a character goes, can I just ask, did anybody else find him a little creepy looking though? Like
what, Data?
Little bit? Data? Just a little bit? Like he kind of freaked me out at first. It took getting used to. As far as the actor and his portrayal and where they went with that character, I have absolutely zero negative to say when we talk about this more, about the Data character and where that went. And the acting was incredible. But when he first came on the screen, it was a bit jarring.
Yeah.
To try and make it look like nothing had changed. I think they should have found a way to make it a little more natural, but that's just me. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean that's actually a thought I had earlier. Actually, I mentioned that to Chuck a few episodes ago that I thought he looked kind of weird. But I think that's because like, you know, the character design itself is from like a totally different era, and it's being brought back and sort of the modern day filmmaking, and so you're kind of using like these sort of old school aesthetics with modern day filmmaking. Kind of doesn't quite go together. You know, it is jarring. Like, because today, if someone were designing a character like Data, they probably wouldn't make his skin shiny like that with like neon green.
Oh, because in the new high
eyes.
Definition, shiny skin is shiny skin.
Yeah, he's practically like. I mean, that's. I mean, I hope is that what we're gonna look like in heaven, and not the cocoon aliens? Is that?
Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that the character design piece, right? Because you compare that to like Saru on Star Trek Discovery, which is an alien design that could not have existed earlier because the makeup effects were not nearly the same, and you know, and you see some of the cybernetic enhancement stuff going on with characters in Discovery that could not have existed on television earlier.
Yeah, I found Data to be way shinier in this series than previous entries, including the more modern movies.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is they were overly. I think they probably did some digital smoothing,
probably,
on him to make him look the way he looked. But also I have to say that, you know, I think one thing that was really off was his eyes. Right, his eyes are very different looking in Picard than they are on Next Generation. But I do kind of like that there was a mild tweak to it that almost helped emphasize that he's an artificial life form and not just a guy in makeup.
Yeah, and
so that actually worked for me, the way that the sort of otherworldliness of him, because he is supposed to look, you know, like he's supposed to be in the uncanny valley territory. That's
true. That's a good way of looking at it.
Cybernetic enhancements make me excited to talk about a character who I'm so excited showed up. But go ahead, carry on.
Okay, all right.
Enough said.
Where were we going with that? I don't know. I think that was just.
Well, you hadn't given your thoughts yet, JP.
Your thoughts, initial thoughts.
Yeah. I like that they. I liked returning to the universe as it would be, like, kind of. Like we kept up with the timeline. I think it's good to go forward. I'm wrestling, kind of. You know, I just finished this like today, and I'm still kind of processing some stuff. I thought they played with some interesting ideas. It was kind of fun revisiting old characters, watching them interact with each other and stuff. The story I thought was interesting. Did it live up to my expectations? I think so. I didn't really have like enormous expectations. I wasn't hoping it would change TV or be like a milestone on television or anything like that. Just hoping it would be good, which is kind of what I always hope for with Star Trek. At least just be good. But you know what's interesting is lately, and this might take us into a pretty interesting topic. I don't know if I want to really dive deep into it right now. But I will say that I've kind of been wrestling with like a lot of commentary about making Star Trek cool. And how I fundamentally very much disagree with how they were trying to make Star Trek cool with Picard. And that I actually think they were just trying to make it like television today, which I think it's ultimately what happened. But that could either be good or bad. Because I don't know if I want to dive into it, because I feel like I'm going to take over the whole episode if I do it. I don't know. Do you guys want me to just dive into my thoughts?
Let me say this first.
Okay.
Because you said the making Star Trek cool thing, and a big part of what people are talking.
Sorry, you froze.
Because of like the shit.
You froze for like
Wonderful.
5 seconds.
Am I here now?
Yes.
So I think a big part of what people are talking about when they're complaining about it being just trying to make it cool is the aesthetic of the show. The way the new ship he gets looks, the way the crew he gets looks. What I will say is I actually found it incredibly satisfying because it genuinely felt like a progression in that universe where a captain who became an admiral who is like revered by everybody is now the older guy who walks onto a new ship and is like when he has to pilot the ship at one point and he's interacting with these like Tony Stark like holograms where he's moving his hands around and things are happening. I found that to be great because it's Patrick Stewart, who's incredible actor, sitting there playing this older guy who's messing around with newer technology going, I know how to do this, but what is this? And I just thought I found the whole thing pleasing personally. Yeah. So the whole argument of like, oh, they just did that to make it cool is annoying because no, they did it to update it to where we're at today. And in that universe, you see it as it was updated to where it would have been years after he was the captain of the Enterprise that JP is currently sitting on. Years after that, he is now this older gentleman who is retired, living in a vineyard, who now has to get back on a ship. And it's kind of like if your grandpa who drove a car had to then jump into the new like Honda Civic, I don't know, like the Type R with all the Apple CarPlay and stuff in it. And he's going, Tesla's even better. Had to jump into it and go, yeah, I know how to drive. And like, yeah, you know how to drive and you're obviously going to do okay, but you've got to figure out like what the heck is all this stuff. And I think that it just fit. To me, it fit. It felt like a natural progression of that universe too, that they're going to move forward to a point where it's going to look different, feel different, and ultimately be more, if you want to use the stupid term that people are complaining about, it's going to be more cool because humanity does progress toward a more aesthetically pleasing thing with everything they deal with. They want to feel cooler driving things. And Father Fun's sending me hearts right now. I don't really know how to handle it.
He likes what you're saying. It's fine.
I think I have to leave. Like that just caught me off guard.
Okay.
Well, one thing I want to point out to you in this conversation.
Wait. Since he interrupted us with hearts, can I just tell you this phone that I had to go find? I have to show you my my whole theme is based on this, and when you unlock it, my entire theme is Riker. So like when he showed up, we're gonna get there, but when he showed up, we're doing good. We're doing good.
Sorry, it's just the heart. The little emoji just keeps flashing at me, and I just am like, stop doing that.
No, but I was going to say one of the things too that people have criticized that I've seen about the show in terms of it being like cool is Rafi being a drug user and Rios, is it the captain's name? Captain Rios.
Rios.
Rios. Yeah. Him smoking, and they're like, oh, it's edgy and cool or whatever. But Testing. What I actually, yeah, and that too. What I've always, Kane and I talk about this a lot when we watch other Star Trek shows, is that there's, we always talk about like who are the people that are on the periphery of the main story of Star Trek, right? Because the previous shows are very Starfleet centric. You only get little glimpses of what your average citizen of the Federation is like, right? And you think about like in our world now, with billions of people with little pockets of different, some people are, there's seedy criminals, there's people struggling with this thing. It's a very complicated thing. And you stretch that out over, thousands of worlds and different alien species and all that. Like there's got to be these cool little pockets and little interesting pockets of civilization and different things going on with different people. And, you see it, you just see it in the periphery of the other Star Trek shows. This show actually kind of put it front and center. And I liked that. I liked seeing that there are people who are kind of disillusioned by Starfleet. Rios is a great character in that regard because, so many of the other captains in previous Star Trek shows were just there to show how good like Kirk was as a captain or whatever. They, you don't really see the human cost, and, you never get to see the ship that's just full of the the captain who was promoted out because everybody thought they were a jerk, and so it's the ship where it's who you stuck a bunch of people that you really don't want running anything, but you got to give them promotions and you got to do their thing. Like, you never see that part of Star Trek, and so you never really see as much the human cost of all the crazy stuff they encounter. So to have this guy who witnesses Captain kill himself and it caused him to have like a mental break, like, that's an interesting character that has been hinted at in previous Star Trek, but you never really dwell on that character. And so I liked being able to see that more.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you that usually it's more peripheral characters, and I can't say that word, but you know what I mean, in the past. But people who would argue that these characters, because of the stuff they deal with and the issues that they're bringing up, don't fit into the Star Trek universe and it's just making it cool, I would argue didn't watch Star Trek. Like, how could you be a Star Trek fan and not realize that there are entire episodes about addiction and depression and all that?
Yeah, Rios is not that different from O'Malley, right?
Right. I mean, look at the people who are hanging out at Quarks on Deep Space Nine. Yeah. Like, there's all kinds of seedy, broken people hanging out in that bar, but you don't get a whole episode about them.
I think it was great. I mean, I think it's production values, it's technology, it's like, if they tried to create a show that was back in the aesthetic of the late 1980s and early 90s, it would be a parody of itself, and it wouldn't be able to do anything, I guess, because people would just be complaining about, imagine shooting it in that aspect ratio and stuff. Like, our minds would just break, right? So I'm just not. I don't care, I mean, and I think you can see the same things across all IPs that grow over time. Like, we just rewatched, Star Wars episode 4, right? And then we watched episode 9, and it's just like, they're not the same property anymore. Basically because of production values, right? It's just like, these things shift and change, and that's fine. You can cuss now on TV, and so the characters cuss. Like, I'm fine with it. But I did want to say one thing that Charles said that really caught me is, I really liked how it was kind of a meditation on brokenness. How this first season was kind of a meditation on brokenness, and how the moment where it really stood out to me was when Picard was talking to Rios on the ship trying to recruit him, and he says, "I know you." Like, he looks around the ship and he sees that he still folds his stuff in a certain way, and he still keeps his shoes under his bed in the same way or whatever. And he says, "You're Starfleet. Starfleet may have screwed you, but you're Starfleet." And he said that, and I realized, like, oh, that's exactly what's going on with Rafi. That's exactly what's going on with Picard. It's these people who hold Starfleet and the Federation with this ideal and have dedicated their entire life to it, and then each in their own way have been screwed by that organization. And so the whole arc is really, and certainly 7 of 9 would be part of this as well. Like, they all kind of, the whole show is a journey of them reclaiming what it means to be that idealized Gene Roddenberry Starfleet.
Father Fun picked two things that I found interesting, and Father Fun and Father Chuck, but I kind of lost who said what. But talking about how if they filmed it exactly how it was, it would be a parody of itself. If people want to see Star Trek exactly the way it was, updated to the point where it perfectly fits, go watch The Orville. It is a parody of itself that nails it 100% to the point where it feels like you're watching Star Trek. It's satisfying like watching Star Trek, but you realize, oh yeah, this is ridiculous. Like the comedy is only the fact that it knows if I play this straightforward and do it exactly how it was, that's the comedy of it in today's world. So if people want to see what happens if you get Star Trek exactly like they think they want it, then go watch The Orville, which I would argue is a perfect continuation of Star Trek for people who want that. If you want to see where would this universe have gone after the last time we saw it to the quote-unquote modern day, meaning years after where we left them, then I would argue Picard did a pretty incredible job. Again, we're not at the end yet. I've got some bones to pick with the ending of it. Okay. But overall, it did an incredible job of showing us what that universe would progress toward, because unfortunately, humanity has a history and a proven track record of screwing things up. Mm-hmm. So if we had something like the Federation and it continued to carry on into the future, it would be a lot like, and let me put this into Masters of Divinity territory, what Picard did with the Federation would fit a lot with a conversation about what the quote-unquote church in the Western world has gone through, from being the Federation of the past that is saving all the different species and aliens and out there, and it's a hope for humanity, and then has become something that has hurt people, driven them away, and caused them to go, I still believe in the ideals of this, but I don't want anything to do with the actual organization of what this is. Right. Like, Picard to me very much felt like watching the millennial / post-millennial generation commentary on the church. Like, I am spiritual, but I'm done with the church. It's kind of like, I am all about exploration, but I'm done with the Federation.
So what you're saying is that so what you're saying is that Jean-Luc Picard is like the John Calvin of the Federation, a reformational figure who recognizes that certain things are predetermined, but we have to be, hold fast to the ideal.
No, I would argue Picard falls somewhere between I Kissed Dating Goodbye and Rob Bell, where he still buys into the ideals of it, but has become an entirely different voice in it and doesn't even realize he's there. So he's somewhere in there. So that's what I'd say. But anyway, carry on. I forget what my second point was, because I already forget the two things we were talking about. That was the one.
I'm interested in what you guys thought about the subplot with Dr. Jurati and, her relationship to Bruce Maddox, and how she was influenced by Admiral O and murdered Maddox. Spoilers. I guess you should say that first. How do you guys feel about sort of her arc? Because I thought it was really interesting. Like, this is a character who, out of horrible desperation, murdered someone, like the most important person in her life, and then she kind of stayed with Picard, and people had to kind of adjust to what she did.
That touches on from a filmmaking point of view, touches on one of my complaints with the show.
Okay.
That is designed for a streaming network. That one of the joys and incredible things about streaming network is they are released from the pressure of having to follow a week-by-week schedule. Yeah. So they can draw out a storyline knowing that you can binge it. But then they release a streaming network in a week-by-week schedule, and it's kind of screwed something up because they felt like they had to rush each episode so that it kept you coming back every week, which is the one thing, because there's a lot of things that binge watching has ruined, just like there's a lot of things that the old school way of doing things has ruined. But one of the great things about binge watching shows, when they release an entire episode at a time, they can have 2 to 3 episodes of a show where literally nothing happens but character development, and we're okay with that because we know we can continue to watch it. Whereas if you make me wait week to week to week to week and nothing happens, you're going to lose my attention and I'm not going to come back the next week. So this follows that old formula where they felt like her character had to jump forward too quickly. And I feel like her journey was incredible but felt rushed.
That's a sentiment that I sort of feel about the whole show, is that once it was all said and done, it feels like there was 2 or 3 episodes that are missing. You know what I mean? It just, they set up this real big, ponderous thing in the beginning, and then it felt, as I said to Patrick many weeks ago when we talked about this, I said that, it almost felt like they ran out of money at the end, which is very fitting to a Next Generation property, because that happened almost every season. But it had that feeling that that was probably supposed to be a longer show, but they only got budgeted for so many episodes, so they tried to fit a whole lot in, and just some things kind of disappeared that would have been nice to see, just some connective tissue. I mean, for instance, the final episode, like the main twist of the show, of the season, is delivered via exposition. You don't really even see it.
Which one was that?
The Vision.
Right.
You see the Vision, which the Vision consists of, I believe, $75 worth of B-roll footage you can get off of like Getty Images, and that's not a joke. Like, that's the actual truth. And the explanation of that is delivered by a character. And you're just supposed to take that at face value. So little things like that were kind of frustrating with the show. And I think Girardi is one of those too, where she does this really awful thing, but by the end we're kind of like, forget about it. But I guess she also didn't do it totally under her own volition, because O had done something to her to make her, because she'd shown her this vision, which messed with her head. So it wasn't entirely just, it was somewhat under duress or whatever. It wasn't.
Well, it was one of those instances, and that's where I felt like the show really failed itself in her character, and ultimately that storyline of the Vision. It's one of those instances where they didn't allow you enough time to feel enough for what the character's going through for it to have an impact. Because what happened is somebody showed her this vision where her understanding of it was, I have to do this or all of the universe is doomed. If I don't make sure that one thing doesn't happen, everything else is doomed. So it placed them in this this moral dilemma that we're known for throughout movies of, like, if you knew that it's a whole Hitler baby concept. Like, if you could go back in time,
Edith Keeler must die.
So, but they didn't give us any time to feel what the character was feeling. So it felt very rushed to have her murder somebody and us be like, oh, that's so sad because we understand what you're going through. Well, no, we don't. Like for example, the only introduction we have to the emotional dilemma this character is facing is the B-roll footage that Father Chuck is talking about. Like, we got to see that twice, and we're supposed to understand why she murdered her lifelong mentor and like the person that she based her whole life around, when all we saw is a couple glimpses of like Google images flash before our eyes, and then we're supposed to go, okay, cool, I get it. And that was one problem I had. Even though the actress, it's Alison Pill, and I can't for the life of me remember where I'm familiar with.
Scott Pilgrim.
I'm familiar with her with Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah,
nailed it. Thank
what
you.
was her name?
But
she's a drummer.
Yeah. I love Scott Pilgrim. I can't believe we haven't talked about that yet. But anyway, the second she came on screen, I immediately was excited, even though I couldn't remember where I saw her from. But I was immediately excited, and her performance throughout the show did nothing but live up to my excitement. Like, her in that character portraying the emotions and the struggle was dead on, and I loved it. But the writing was so rushed. I'm like, you didn't give me time to care. And that was really a disservice to her more than even the show. It was a disservice to the character and the portrayal that she's presenting to us, and how amazing that was, and it didn't quite reach it in the story development and how it went.
Yeah, I agree with you. She's a terrific actress, and I think what was handed to her, she did really, really well with it. Probably, I think she kind of stood out more than anybody else in the show, to be honest. Who wasn't like a better,
honestly, more than Patrick Stewart to me. Like, she was the standout of this show.
Well, I guess
that's just my opinion, but
I guess part of the storyline for her is probably meant to bounce off of Patrick Stewart's time as Locutus, someone who killed a bunch of people that, like, he still feels guilt for his participation in that, even though it wasn't fully like his thing. Because they pick up a few threads with that, and I'm wondering if that might be part of it too. Like, because their whole moment in the bridge of the ship at the end of during the last episode kind of gives that sense of he's helping her move past the guilt of this horrible thing she did.
I didn't really have any problem with her. I did read the book that came out in late February. There was a book,
a novelization.
I forgot what it was called. It wasn't a novelization. It was a prequel. It was a prequel novel, but it didn't come out. It didn't come out until between episodes 5 and 6. It was called The Last Best Hope. Yeah. Okay. I read it I listened to it on audiobook while I was traveling for my sabbatical, and I really liked it, and it did do a good job of kind of fleshing out her and her motivations. Interesting. I wonder if one of the reasons why we're having this reaction to her is that she's supposed to be both. She has to carry a lot of weight because she is both the character that's kind of making things happen, that is compelling the story forward, but then she also has to take this position as kind of the hero worship kind of audience in some ways as well. That she has to be the one she's not grizzled, she's not damaged. She's sad that she's broken, I guess, because her cybernetics program gets shut down. But she's still young enough that she knows this great man, and she has to follow him along and kind of carry that weight. But then she also has to be the main mover of the story. And I wonder if it falls down a little bit because as soon as Elnor comes in, right, he ends up he gets to be that naive character, that character that's naive to the world, and then she has to rely. We don't see her anymore as the audience who's doing hero worship, because he can be that in some ways.
Yeah, I can see that. That's interesting.
So she has to stand on her own legs as that. Whatever that antagonistic thing is, the person who's compelling the story forward.
Yeah, there's definitely some tension in that she's sort of helping move the story forward, but she's also has antagonistic qualities of kind of foiling the story. And I think what's interesting about that is that she is sort of that kind of fangirl, sort of fill-in for fans type character. And what's interesting is that, in prestige television, which is like the era of television we're in now, one of the big aspects of it is you take sort of archetypal characters and then they go through like a really radical sort of dramatic transformation through the process of the story, which is basically kind of ditch that archetype completely. And in this case, she murdered somebody, and that kind of brought up way more tension and a whole lot more transformation to her character. Which, by the way, speaking of prestige television, I have got like a whole thing that I was going to go over and how it relates to Picard, if you guys would indulge me for just a minute. Is that okay?
You've got 60 seconds.
So there's this really great article by one of my favorite podcasters named Matt Kreisman, who wrote this article on prestige television for Current Affairs. And the article is called How TV Became Prestigious Without Getting Better. And what's interesting about it is that he kind of tracks like where prestige TV came from. It all kind of started with The Sopranos, and then kind of eventually rolled its way into like Deadwood, The Wire, and then AMC picked it up with like Mad Men and Breaking Bad, and then yada yada yada, we get Game of Thrones and everything since then. But he kind of broke down aspects of just sort of some points that sort of make up prestige TV. I'm not saying like prestigious television, but like the sort of the subgenre of prestige TV, what it's supposed to be. And I was actually really interested in kind of reading this and like, oh wow, I can actually pinpoint parts in the show that we just watched that make up prestige TV. So here we go. I broke it down. First of all, it's the storytelling is serialized, which is kind of a given. It's all serialized these days. The depth of characterization and the theme of a novel. The visual sensibility of film and cinema. Episodes end without pat resolution. Stories or arcs stretch out over episodes and seasons. And we're just like in the first season of this show, so it's like not quite that. But there are like A plots and B plots going on simultaneously through each episode. characters undergo dramatic transformation that subvert the idea of an archetype, which I just mentioned in Girardi. You have these sort of brooding, tortured anti-heroes. Stillness punctuated by sudden acts of violence. Montage and ironically counterposed musical choices, which that's happened a few times. Gratuitous nudity and violence, kind of. Let's see. And there's also sort of like a kind of a sense of like gritty realism that sort of accentuates the style of the series. But I thought it was interesting because that kind of like, I don't know, that kind of fits in with Picard. Like all those, like, oh, another thing, when you kind of look at all these sort of prestigious TV shows that started with Sopranos and went through Deadwood, The Wire, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, they're all about like troubled older men who are kind of like the movie Unforgiven, where you're sort of revisiting the past, or you're just kind of dealing with the fact that you're aging, getting old. And another kind of thing that he pointed out that I thought was really interesting is that dream sequences and flashbacks and death visions, like visions you get like while you're dying, sort of abstractly represent like what the character is going through or is experiencing. So, I don't know. I thought that was really interesting. I thought like when you kind of break it down, like that's what we're experiencing with Picard and these things with like, you know, the characters and their arcs and how they're anti-heroes and stuff. It's not necessarily a quality. It's mostly because of the time in which it's made. And I find that to be a unique thing about Star Trek itself, in that each iteration sort of reflects the time in which they are made. That's true about the first iteration of Star Trek. It's true about Next Generation. It's true about... I haven't really watched Enterprise, so I don't really know how Enterprise feels early 2000s-ish. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it basically deals with like a massive terrorist attack on Earth.
Really?
Yeah.
A temporal Cold War that feels against an enemy that you can't focus on. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is about the war on terror.
Interesting. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting, and I like when people kind of bring up that it's like it just doesn't feel like Star Trek. I'm like, Star Trek is a reflection of its time.
One of the things I would respond to that too is I think that one of the reasons why this might be a reflection of its time too is just thinking back on a lot of the episodes that we've done and that you guys have done, is that this is a time of where nostalgia is marketable. The fact that we're seeing, probably the most beloved character in all of Star Trek come back to tell his next story, and then some of the reaction to it being slightly different, etc., is also part of what is in the zeitgeist now, which is let's dredge up and remake kind of all the stuff that was popular and get those dollars that way.
Right.
But I think it succeeded in that, and I think that's what I was trying to say at the beginning too. Is I think that by making it of its time, making it contemporaneous with where the character's aged at now, and not the Irishmaning his face and all that kind of to try to tell a story in the past. They took the nostalgia and used it to kind of get people in, and then told a story that was different.
Right. Yeah.
And then moved all of Star Trek forward.
I actually think that they were pretty restrained in the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
Compared to like other TV shows and stuff who try to like really milk it,
Oh man, they could have done a Star Trek crew member of the week kind of thing, right? He could have just been traveling around the Milky Way, like visiting old crew members.
Yeah. And
very early on, they say he has that great line about like, I can't go to any of those people because they'll help me. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Like he's like, that's not what we're gonna do, But then of course you have to still have Riker be a part of it, and there's Guinan may be in the next one, Geordi may be in the next one, etc. But like they could have very easily just made it this nostalgia fair, and they didn't. They made something new.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, and that means and to get back to like what I said earlier about the new characters being introduced, like I thought the writing was a little janky to get them introduced, but I'm grateful that they didn't rely on the easy thing of just having a bunch of familiar faces around all the time. I mean, the only character that I feel is super missing from it, and I told Patrick this a while back, the only character that I think is super missing from the story is Beverly Crusher. Like, the fact that she's not around to me is glaring, because she's, even in Next Generation, they knew each other before that show. So that's like his oldest friend. Like, they were legit friends from before that time. So I would love to know where she was in all of this.
Right.
But
there's supposed to kind of be a thing too, like.
I mean, if you look at the timeline that was presented by All Good Things, which that episode opens contemporaneous time frame into where Picard is as a show. But that's things aren't predetermined, so that's
interesting.
I don't know what problem you had with introducing new characters. As soon as Legolas showed up, I was totally on board.
You mean Elrond?
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. What did I say? I said that, right?
He's not Elrond. He doesn't have the rockin' headband. What did you? What was his name again? I forgot his name.
I really don't.
I'm gonna get in early just in case people disagree with me. I loved Elnor. I thought he was awesome.
Yeah, use some of that Romulan candor, that extreme candor.
Honestly,
the whole idea that the deepening of Romulan culture was so great for me, because that idea that there's this whole other strain of almost religious thought that is completely separate from the Romulans that we know, right? This idea of radical candor is so different from everything that the Tal Shiar has been and has controlled all of Romulan society. And then you have this character who, like, because of the way he was raised, just cannot even conceive of not telling the truth about something. It's just such a fascinating idea. Not to mention the fact that he's a badass, that he has an awesome fight starting line, right? Choose to live, which is also like from Deuteronomy, which makes me super happy. And he's a total badass. I will say, sidebar, that Kawat Malat, just in general, I love him. And they are also in the book. They're a lot more in the book. You get to see all the background of how they got to that world and how Picard developed the relationships with them and all that kind of stuff. But I got huge Bene Gesserit vibes from them, right? like it was so Dune, just in the fact that the way that they costumes and everything.
Yeah, and I do have to say, and it's not just because Father Fun gave such an awesome argument, and I mean that for real. I do have to say I love the character, but when the second he walked on screen, I was like, what the crap? Did I put Lord of the Rings in and I forgot? I had to draw attention to the fact that all I could think of is Legolas every time he was on the screen. But as far as the character goes, I really did absolutely love his story, the development, where he went, how he wound up joining Picard and moving on from Picard within the episodes, but that didn't feel rushed. It felt natural and like real. I actually did love the character development to him. So Father Fun, I'm 100% on your side, but I do have to draw attention to the fact that all I could think of was Legolas. I'm like, Orlando Bloom's in this? I didn't know that. And that was all. Sorry, but carry on.
Let's talk about the utter contempt this show has for former Borg.
Oh yeah, like they're just getting slaughtered left and right.
And also, I mean,
beloved 7 of 9.
Oh, 7 of 9 is so
awesome.
great.
Thank you.
But
he's so awesome.
They do Hugh dirty. They do Hugh dirty.
Yeah.
But nothing is as bad as what they do to Icheb. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you're talking about gratuitous nudity.
I can't follow names enough to ever know who we're talking about.
Icheb's ocular trauma.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Icheb, if you've not watched Star Trek Voyager, Icheb is a beloved character who's basically 7 of 9's son. He is they come across a Borg ship with where the drones are just kids.
I didn't know this.
And she and she sort of takes them on. They manage to remove all of their implants and everything like they had done to her. Well, Icheb decides that he wants to join Starfleet and be the first like former Borg or whatever to join Starfleet. And so he begins his Starfleet training on Voyager. And it continues when he gets back to the Alpha Quadrant at the end of Voyager. And so people who like Voyager fans, like this is a deeply loved secondary character. I mean, he is an innocent, he is just this earnest, great kid. And for him to be killed off in a intensely violent pre-credit sequence is shocking.
You could argue it would be like as though the Terminator franchise decided to just kill John Connor off in the first 30 seconds of a movie, maybe. Like,
oh God.
I
don't know.
That's a different episode. We'll get into that.
But I will say, effective in establishing why Seven of Nine does what she does. Effective in establishing how awful that villainous character from that episode or whatever her name was, what she is. But like watching it, I just was pretty much, and then it just pretty much if an ex-Borg that wasn't Seven of Nine was on screen, like you knew they were dying because that's just they were sort of the red shirts.
They were the red shirts.
Because Icheb dies and then they do Hugh dirty and then they end up like just blowing a whole bunch of a former Borg out an airlock.
That brings us something for me. I know we got some hardcore Voyager fans on this stream right now as we're recording. Chuck and Father Fun. I've only watched like a couple of episodes of Voyager myself. Father Fun, I want to know what are your thoughts on Seven of Nine and her story and how she's presented in the series.
It was good. I think it was good. 7 of 9. I thought she was. It felt like there was a continuous arc. Again, another person who is disenchanted with Starfleet and with the Federation, where they've gone, who has always been action oriented. Is now we see her taking it into her own hands. With the vigilante justice kind of thing, whatever her group is called, the
Power Rangers.
I also think that I think that there was, again, attached to this whole kind of season about brokenness is how important the XBs are to Picard's own journey, and to see, the other main ex-Borg and see how she has been transformed by the events that have befallen her since we last saw her, and to see Picard, and then to see them have to kind of confront that together on an actual Borg cube with these other, especially with Hugh, who's this kind of self-actualized ex-Borg. When she took over the ship and became queen for a day, that was badass and cool. Awesome. And talking about how I might not want to give this, I might not want to give it up. Like being honest about the drive to power. I was a big fan of her, and I do think that the Borg needed, that they were a really essential and necessary part of the whole journey, even though it was much more about not just as a place for the Romulans to do some stuff and for the destroyer prophecy to come through, just like. We needed to see the Borg again because we needed Picard to experience all that again, to have a name for what he is, right? To hear, there's this moment when Hugh is like XB. He starts talking about all these guys as XBs and giving something a name, kind of honors it or whatever. And Picard has this moment of realization where he's like, I'm an XB. It's like, yes, like that's true. All great. And so I think 7 of 9 had to be a part of that story.
Can I just admit here on the podcast that I may have gotten a little bit teary-eyed during the whole discussion about I can't do this because I might not give it up. And then when she did it and had to give it up and talks about how that, like, I just full disclosure, may have gotten a little teary-eyed watching Star Trek here while she's discussing the whole thing, because that character to me, even though I was a huge Voyager fan when it started, I died off at the end, which I am sad to admit at this point in life. But at the time, I was an ignorant child. The character of 7 of 9 to me was always incredible, because it's like taking that Locutus of Borg, the Picard storyline, and carrying it out through seasons of a TV show. It's like we've talked about before with how TV versus movies and how they have time to develop a character. The Locutus storyline and the concept of this captain who devoted his life to an ideal and then lost everything in an instant because he was assimilated into something else and his free will was taken away. And then he found a way out of that, but spends his entire life going, did I really get out of it? With Next Generation, we saw that in maybe like 3 or 4 episodes, 4 or 5 episodes throughout the entire show. And then a couple times throughout the movies, it's hinted to about his Locutus experience. But with 7 of 9, we got to watch it season after season after season about how it's kind of like, can I put it in terms that hopefully, I hope I don't screw this up, but in real life, it's kind of the mentality of somebody who, and you can cut this out completely, JP, if I step on my own words here, but it's a whole gang mentality about somebody who grew up without a family, who joins something looking for a family, gets involved in a gang, finds out it's wrong, gets out of it, but for the rest of their life, there's a part of them going, yeah, that was wrong and I didn't want to be part of it, but their identity was wrapped up in this family that they became part of. With 7 of 9, for season after season after season, we got to watch this character who was assimilated into something that quote unquote took away her free will and made her become part of something she didn't want to do. She finally got set free, so she has her independence, her humanity, her will, but she really starts questioning, is this really what I want? Because I lost my family. And the development of that storyline for so many seasons with Voyager, and then to see this show where I feel like it's what I wanted for that character in a finale of Voyager. What I wanted is for her to have that moment where she got to confront, yes, this is the family I left behind. I love it. I care for it. I want to take care of it. I will do anything I can to make sure it survives. But I also understand that you have to grow past that. So she, like, that moment in Picard where she talks about how if I do this, I don't know if I'll want to give it up. She becomes a queen for a whole, like, 30 seconds of the show, which was the greatest part of the entire show, in my opinion, and then gives it up to show not only herself, but all those things that she became queen of. She gives it up to show them, yes, we are family. We deserve to exist. We belong here just like everybody else. We have purpose, meaning, worth, everything else. But you are also free to choose what you want to do with that. And that whole storyline was brought together in like the last half of an episode of Picard and the first half of the next episode, I think, is how it played out. Mm-hmm. But to me, that was the perfect, like, culmination of the character that I watched through Voyager and fell in love with. To see her come to terms with what does it mean to have belonged to a family, to get free from that and realize that there's more outside of all the ideals they have, but then to say I can take care of them too while doing that. And I'm not going to lie, I may or may not have had a tear or two falling down the face during it. Maybe. Yeah,
it was a touching, definitely.
That's my thought.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, we haven't talked at all about sort of who the story kind of centers around, aside from Picard, which is Soji.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This whole thing is trying to figure out, like, who the heck Soji was, where'd she come from, what is she doing? Of course, she's an android created by Bruce Maddox, cloned from Data, a positronic neutron from Data, and you find out that she was created to find out what happened on Mars, right? And then to report back to the colony of Data.
To come back to the Star Trek the original series planet that they went to there with all their.
Yeah, I love that, by the way.
I did. I actually really.
Everyone who complained that Star Trek wasn't weird enough, I think that should have been the payoff right there for them.
The whole Mars storyline and the whole destruction thing. Did that happen in something else we've seen before? Or did they just pretend that it's happened before? Because I honestly couldn't remember. Did I like miss out on this and it actually happened? Or
are you talking about
No.
the
So
supernova?
it did actually happen.
like the introduction.
Not the supernova. The Mars.
No, the Mars
attacks.
where all the
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
where all
it doesn't.
the
It doesn't.
android
There's a
life forms took over.
Oh, okay.
there's a short treks that came out before Picard called Children of Mars. That is only, I don't know, it's about 10 or 15 minutes, but it's kind of about the event happening and unfolding through the eyes of two little girls. And then it takes place in that novelization, where you get to see all the run up and lead up to it. Actually, like Geordi is kind of in charge of making the androids based on schematics developed by somebody else, but he's actually like on Mars making them. And he's off Mars. He's off Mars when the attack actually happens. But yeah, you have to kind of take it as a given in that first episode when they kind of explain how Picard lost the fleet, or how he wasn't able to save everybody from the supernova because Mars attacks.
Right. So right. So if this helps explain to our audience who's listening and may not be like complete Star Trek nerds, then you can leave it in. If it doesn't, you can edit it out here. But I'm 100% okay with my ignorance showing. But I saw that and I was like, am I supposed to remember this happening from something else? Because it felt like it had been like introduced before and I missed it. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't the case. So anyway, that's all. So carry on with what you were going to say.
Well, I was just going to mention, I thought her story was really cool and kind of a new, interesting, some people would probably say cliche, but a new kind of interesting archetype to kind of pursue in Star Trek is sort of the question of what makes us human, using, synthetic beings as a kind of vehicle for that. And I actually thought, speaking of things that make us kind of misty-eyed, but the whole episode where they go to meet Riker and Deanna Troi on Nephilim, I don't know. Nepenthe. And they're met by their daughter, Kestra. That's her name, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the way, like, they couldn't have made a more perfect... Like, every story has to have that part where the human realizes they're a robot and it's, like, something traumatic. And the way she kind of comes to terms with it is, like, while interacting with this child who's, like, fascinated with her. And not fascinated in a way like a child would be fascinated with a toy, but, like, she kind of sees her as, like, oh, you may not be human, but that what you are is, like, better than human to me. Like, you're something much more special and much more perfect than that.
That episode was... perfect. I think that was my favorite episode of the whole. The one where they went to the casino planet was fun, but the one where they went to Nepenthe was perfect. I think that Marina Sirtis, like, her acting is incredible. You got to see her
right back into the role like clockwork, man. Like,
but even better than, like that scene when she figures out just, emotionally what is going on with Picard, but there's no words exchanged and they just hug, just incredible. But about the girls, Soji and Kestra, like, it was a really important and necessary moment in the show, because it was also, I think that even, like Deanna says, you've got a teenager here, and Soji needed someone else who was also coming into their own and trying to figure out who they were, to see herself in that, to humanize her and to see her journey as like an okay thing, and to humanize her and to see her as something other than, and I love that Picard got taken down in that. He got taken down a peg, for being a dick. And then just as a sidebar, like, I loved that whole the Thad's death and the grief that they have as a family, and kind of how they all are processing that still. I just thought it was really masterfully handled and beautiful.
Yeah, I still kind of love the part where, like, you kind of know Riker knows she's descended from Data because of the head tilt. Mm-hmm. He's like, I'd recognize the head tilt anywhere. Can we all do? Can I just a minute? Can we all do our own version of the Data head tilt for a second? Just. Can everyone just give me a Data head tilt?
I do think that was clunky writing though. Like I wish that they did just left that head tilt in there, but he didn't need to. I didn't need the exposition, right? I didn't need to be.
I can see that. Yeah.
With these like iterations on popular things, like I wish that they would just allow hardcore fans to have something, that it isn't like.
Let us gatekeep a little. Come on.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Like, you can miss this, and that's okay.
I 100% agree with you, but I can see why they put that in there for people who didn't like watch The Next Generation. But what I will say is, whether it was on purpose, and if it was, whatever writers wrote those episodes, they are geniuses, and everybody in Hollywood should be hiring them to write TV. But if it was a little bit of a mistake, which tends to happen, little happy mistakes make things perfect. The Picard Riker and Troy, forgive my mistake, the Riker and Troy introduction and use in this show is the perfect example of how nostalgia can be used without being there just to serve nostalgia. Like, it fits so perfectly into the narrative of this show. It served perfectly a purpose to moving the show forward, even though Troy, I'm sorry, but as a character, shows back in Next Generation centered around Deanna Troi tend to be my least favorite.
They were terrible because they were terrible.
But they nailed it in this because she is Deanna Troi, but it perfectly served the narrative of this show to where it was introduced and where it moved it forward and cut off. And then Riker's reintroduction at the end, not to jump forward, but his reintroduction at the end felt deserved, which is hard to do after only introducing him for like 2 episodes and then throwing him back out and don't bring him back until the end. But it felt deserved because whoever wrote those 2, I swear, they're either geniuses or the most lucky writers on the face of the earth. Either way, I would tell anybody out there, hire them and try again because they nailed it.
One of the writers is Michael Cabanas, a pretty celebrated novelist.
Well, there you go.
Like, who else is in that writer's room? Kiva Goldsman, who's one of the best screenwriters in Hollywood.
I was completely enamored of the show all the way up until the penultimate episode, the second to last episode, when they get to the planet. Whatever about the aesthetic and all that kind of stuff, but when the prophecy is fully revealed, and all the stuff that happens on that, the reveal of a new Soong, all that stuff. Like I felt like that episode was so lazy and just terrible.
I'm inclined to agree with you a little bit. Yeah,
I just couldn't handle it. Like I was legitimately depressed after watching that episode because I just was like, oh my God, they took me on 8 episodes of this incredible journey, and then I feel like I just got slapped in the face. And it's and part of the reason was because I was one of my favorite games of all time, or series of all time, is a game called series called Mass Effect, which is a science fiction series. And the whole plot line of that game is ancient sentient artificial life forms from outside time and space who are coming back to cleanse the the universe or the galaxy of its organic life, and we should be afraid of that. And I was just like, oh, come on, like I've already seen this story, and I feel like I don't need that. I will say though that by the time they came back around in the last episode, I was a little bit more on board with it, and I did even enjoy the Cthulian like tentacle, it was kind of like the Sentinels from the Matrix, the thing happening. I was fine with that, and I think I would be fine with that if that's the direction that it took in season 2. But I really want them to spend more time on what happened on Mars, what's going on with the Romulans. I just want more Romulan stuff in season 2. So,
I agree with you. I think one of the best parts of the show is how much they explore the Romulans.
So everything he said, and then I said before, I loved the way this show began and started. I loved how it introduced this world to us. I loved how it felt like a natural progression of that universe. And I said I have issues with the end, and now we're at the end. So the last 2 episodes of the show felt 100% like me, like pure fan service. It's like they took Picard, they moved him forward to where we would have seen him naturally progress in that universe. They introduced concepts and stuff from him that we would have been like, wow, I wouldn't have expected that, but it totally makes sense. And then the last 2 episodes of the show felt 100% like trying to go back to like the 90s and recreate the Next Generation feel, look, aesthetic, and story writing of Star Trek. Even to the point where, and this is a spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it, but even to the point where Picard dies and gets brought back in this android body, but they put a algorithm in him where he will die whenever. So it's still, he's a normal human being. From Picard's character, from the first time I watched him walk on screen in Next Generation till this episode, it 100% makes sense in his character development to go where he did, to wind up dying, to be brought back in this, and to say, you better not have made me immortal. And then when they say, oh no, we totally put an algorithm in, and he's like, well, like 10 more years would have been fine. All of that was perfect from his character point of view. The way they did it, the way they wrote it, all that felt like fan service for, okay, this is the Next Generation, let's move on. And I didn't like that about the last 2 episodes. It was literally the last 2 episodes, like Father Fun said, where the whole show took this shift where it was like, man, you took me on this journey and then you just kicked me in the face. And I'm not even saying where it went needs to change. I'm saying how it was presented to me should have been changed a little bit, because it was just so disappointing after this journey I was carried on for 8 episodes. And then the last 2 were like, oh yeah, by the way, we know you're a fan, here you go. And it was just, I was disappointed in the last 2. I was disappointed, and I already forgot what my second point was. So whatever, carry on.
All right.
Yeah,
I don't even know where we started with that.
I also felt the last 2 episodes were very disappointing, especially after the setup when you see the planet. All right, they go through the Borg transwarp conduit, right, which is cool. They're doing that. If you watch Voyager, like that's a cool thing that they access that. They get through and then immediately are greeted by these like Orchid spaceships, which is pretty awesome.
Yes, I love
and
it.
then like it's just different. And then you get down to the planet, and I actually kind of like the fact that they're dressed like Next Generation extras, because the costuming seemed a little, like the civilian costume seemed a little jarring to me based off of watching the show, and I'm just that kind of like, I don't understand why you need to redo the Klingons kind of person, but it feels like they ran out of money, because it's like they're clearly on a set for the remainder of the show. It feels very small. Again, you've got the budget B-roll clip for the Vision. You've got evil Soji giving
Sutra.
exposition, whatever, giving exposition on what the Vision's all about, and we're supposed to take that at face value, like, oh, okay, so this is what it is, right? I'm just going to explain it to you, and then they start making plans based off of what she's saying. And then we get an updated version of the Picard maneuver as part of this. And then the part that got me the most and really irritated me a bit was, why does every Starfleet ship is exactly the same? Like, they copy and pasted the same graphic like all over.
I thought for a second Riker was doing the same maneuver as Picard.
Right. Right. It really felt like they had run out of money, but all of it is redeemed by Riker in the captain's chair.
Yeah.
That scene is awesome. And then it gets way better. I was going to say, oh, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
No, the only thing I want to interject so that I can keep my mouth shut and let you talk and quit hogging the episode, because that's what happens when I come back, is the worst part is it didn't feel like they ran out of money. It felt like they ran out of passion. It was like they were going so great with it, and then it literally felt like a season 2.5 episode of Next Generation, where we had this amazing season that caught everybody's attention. We don't know where the crap we're going yet, so let's throw in some exploding head episodes with Federation people. Just go watch the original show, guys. And it just felt like this horrible, awkward in-between phase where they had an incredible thing going. They ran out of inspiration and they went with, let's just dump in all of the nostalgia look and feel of Next
and robot
Generation to
tentacles.
keep them happy. Yeah, and that's all. So I won't interrupt you again, but sorry, I just wanted to throw it in before I forget.
I guess I was expecting something bigger than just like, oh, sentient beings from outside time and space. And what I was legit, part of it too, I think for me was hype in the sense of where I thought things were going. I'm like, okay, you've got the Borg, you've got the Romulans. And then when you start revealing the idea that we're talking about sentient beings outside of time and space, I mean, artificial sentient beings, I thought, holy crap, we're going to have Q. Like I was expecting Q in the finale because it's set up so perfect, right? The Federation has lost its way. Like it's. I mean, I know it would probably just makes like a retread of All Good Things to have Q in this, but it seemed like it was set up to maybe reveal that these artificial life forms, that Q is actually an artificial life form, like that would have been awesome. And to have, it would have made Kana super mad because she hates Q episodes. And so there was a part of me that just wanted to see her reaction if Q showed up on screen. But I felt like there was something more interesting they could have done than just tentacle monsters through a portal. And that, and so that I just that was kind of a letdown. That's what it was all building toward, was just a shot of tentacles coming through a red portal. But so it's weak connective tissue, but to the real heart, and this is the thing about the show, is that it wasn't really about the spectacle. It's a character study. And for it to then, lead to Picard dying and to him sort of being in this like way station where he is having a conversation with the remnant of Data, that to me is the real like climax of the show.
The actual payoff.
And for them, the actual payoff. And for this really great little intimate moment between the two of them that gives Data a really nice send off. That whereas I wasn't necessarily dissatisfied with Nemesis, it is nice that you kind of got like a legit goodbye and some closure to the character. And just to see Brent Spiner in the role one last time, and just the really heavy idea of like, I can't really be human unless I die.
Yeah. And
so death being this necessary thing, which is important in our current world, I think, to talk about. And so to have that, I think was really that redeems so much of the iffy stuff for me. But I will go on record and say that I am not a fan of artificial life form Picard. I don't know what else I could have done, but I'm just not a fan of that. But I also know that. Yeah, I mean, I do know that that this was pitched to Patrick Stewart by I can't remember the show the producer or whatever, the woman who wrote The Treatment. Yeah. She is like a well-respected Voyager novelist. She writes the continuing stories of Star Trek Voyager, really loved in the Star Trek fan community. Patrick Stewart took lunch with her to politely decline her offer to reprise the role, and came away signing on to a 3-season deal because she came up with a 3-season storyline. So I know that the arc is bigger than what we saw. And I'm sure the second season is going to be dealing with Picard adapting to this sense of what is humanity. And now he's basically, in Data's shoes. He
has reached technological singularity, baby.
Yeah, baby. And so I know that there's some interesting stuff coming for the show, but I was really let down with those 2 episodes overwhelmingly. Those final 2 episodes, I feel like they're very forgettable in the long run.
Yeah. What's up, Fun?
I just had one thought, which was, I'm really happy thinking back on it. I'm really happy that it ended up being a diplomatic solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that felt true to character, and that Riker would have to carry out, Riker, who's much more action oriented, would have to carry out Picard's wish one more time, to not have a confrontation. I love that. That felt like a good Picard thing.
Yeah. So, I feel doubly rewarded in that aspect because even though there wasn't a space battle between those two, it was cool to watch Flowers have a space battle with the Romulans. That's the kind of Star Trek I like.
And I will add two things, because with Father Fun, I agree 100% on the diplomatic thing, but also Father Chuck there reminded me exactly when I told you that I was talking and I forgot my second point the whole time. He nailed it dead on, because my second thing was the whole thought of who else thought that when they said that they're going to summon this inorganic life form, who else thought that Q was going to show up at the end of the episode? And when he didn't, I was completely disappointed, like 100% let down. And you could say, well, that goes against everything you say about fan service. It does, but at the same time, it doesn't, because I feel like that would have nailed it so dead on if he's what showed up. And he shows up at the end, so you bring the Borg storyline, you bring the Q storyline, the Picard storyline, all into one episode where they have to confront each other and say, because the Borg only know humanity because of Q in the first place. Like, he's the one who screwed it all up. So anyway, you bring it all back together in this whole perfect thing of, like, what is humanity? What does it mean to have free will and power and the ability to make decisions? And is unlimited power, aka Q, or unlimited control and loss of freedom the way to go? Or is it that's in between a humanity? Like, to me, that would have fit so perfectly in this. And then Tentacles came out and I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry. I did. I wanted to cry. But
yeah, what if Q? What if the resolution
say,
was? Sorry, I was just thinking about what if the resolution was Q? Q was the one to put Picard into the golem, and that was his
oh my gosh,
next test or something. That would have been awesome.
Q better be. And I know our podcast isn't influential enough to anybody to be listening, but if somebody accidentally clicks on this,
Michael Chabon,
Q better be in the freaking second season, because as annoying, and I agree with Kana, I hate his episodes, and that's exactly why I love them.
Oh, the Robin Hood episode is so great.
Q to me is the ultimate, like, every time he comes on screen, I want to throw up and punch him in the face. And that's exactly why I hope he keeps showing up on screen. And if that doesn't make sense to you, I'm sorry, but that's my life. He walks on screen and I'm like, I want to puke and hit you. And I have his autograph, so I met him. Carry on.
He's so great. We're getting Robert Picardo in the next season.
Nice.
The Doctor is going to be in the next season. So, like, you need some Q. You need some Q love. Or...
Well, he's going to show up. Unless the show gets canceled, he's going to show up eventually, and it'll be great when he does, hopefully.
Yeah.
The only way that they could make it better is if they find some way to get Benjamin Sisko to show up. You know, like what if he had been like the being from outside time and space, you know, because he had been with the prophets.
Or Wesley Crusher, right? Because he with the Traveler.
I can't believe Crusher didn't.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
Even just his face on the screen.
Where were the Travelers in all of this?
Patrick can't stand Wesley, so I love.
Right there with you, buddy. All right, guys, I really got to go, but I'll end it with these thoughts of mine. Overall, I thought it was a really well done show. I wasn't annoyed by any kind of fan service or anything, and I was really impressed that they kind of reined in on the nostalgia factor. And this whole prestige TV thing, it could probably be used against it if someone were so inclined, but that wasn't my intention. I think that our love for Star Trek, I think every Star Trek fan's love for Star Trek goes beyond the actual quality of the show and more into what it's getting at, what it's trying to say, which is ultimately, one of the things is that despite no matter what is happening in this universe, whether our dystopian Starfleet all of a sudden wants to 9/11 us, or if there's a tentacle synth monster outside of time trying to get to us, there's always the chance for a better tomorrow, and it's worth hoping for, at least. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the great thing about Star Trek, and why I keep coming back to it, despite the first two seasons of TNG being some of the worst television I've ever seen in my life. I never had to binge. was literally physically painful. Yeah, I got through it. But I say all that to say I still think it was a good show, and I think that it was successful in what it was trying to do, and I loved seeing Patrick Stewart. One of the things I love so much about The Next Generation and why I keep going back to it is I love watching adults who know what they're doing resolve conflicts in a mature manner. That's my favorite thing about Star Trek: The Next Generation.
So you love pure fantasy.
Yeah.
I agree. Go ahead.
Which is something I don't see quite often in the real world these days. And it was good to see that as well in this show. Picard is pure empathy to me. And it's refreshing to see characters like that who are just made up of empathy and trying to show people like just I don't want to say the light because that sounds so corny, but like no, seriously, like when he told Soji, like if the Starfleet hated you so much, they would be with the Romulans right now trying to rain down hell on you. They'll help us. I thought that was a great little moment. You know, not super profound or anything, but it's like these are adults who know how to like resolve conflicts. Imagine that.
You should definitely now watch season 2 of Discovery.
I want to.
Some of the best Star Trek that I've seen.
Wow, and we should. And you know what? Join us again sometime in the future where we talk about Discovery.
Before we add anything, let JP have his drop the mic moment because that was the perfect wrap up for this episode. So just drop the mic, JP.
Sorry, I feel like I missed something. Wow. No, I was just going to remind.
Okay. Yikes. Okay, I'll just sit back in my captain's chair. Off screen.
I love that the way that background is set up. By the way, is that like you put some kind of rolling chair between like.
I'm way up front. I'm looking at the screen.
You're sitting right in front of the view screen, JP. You're not in the.
No, I'm the captain. I sit in front of all of you.
You're the old guy who rolled up to the TV, and everybody else is like, "What the crap? Now we can't see."
They keep minimizing the screen. I don't.
You're like
I get it, sir.
In front of the TV when I'm trying to play Animal Crossing.
It is May, which means it's time for Music Mayhem. And for the first time in our show's history, I'm going first, which means I get to announce our first album. And I need Matt to come back into view because I want to watch his reaction. I usually kind of preface these by saying why I chose it.
Hold on.
I'm gonna pull the trigger. Just like pulling the trigger, I pull the trigger by choosing this. We're going with Nevermind by Nirvana.
I'm in.
It's time. I've been dancing around it for 4 years. It's time. Nevermind by Nirvana. Chuck is so unimpressed. He's like,
duh.
I'm like, isn't that band that the guy from Foo Fighters started before he started the good one?
Isn't
Is
that
right?
band?
Is it?
Weren't they a band or something?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm glad because I started recently listening to Tori Amos. And I never listened to her before, and I started listening to her because of her cover of Teen Spirit.
Oh yeah.
Which has got me kind of reading up a little bit on that era of Nirvana. So I'm actually kind of interested in this episode.
That's kind of ironic because I listened to Puddle of Mud tried to do a cover of Nirvana recently, and that's what got me back into
it. Yeah, I discovered the Tori Amos cover as a palate cleanser from that Puddle of Mud cover.
Someone's got to send that to
You've got to see it if you have not.
Yeah, send it to me.
All right, I want to thank Father Fun.
Send it to all of us.
Yeah, I want to thank Father Fun for joining us once again for the first time in years. Seems like.
Literally.
Thank you so much.
Honestly, Father Fun, honestly, you've been more committed than me, so take my place.
It's been at least 13 months since I've been on. I think it's been a long time. So.
I think the last
last time you were on the show.
Yeah, Hamilton.
Yeah, I think Music Mayhem. Yeah.
2 Music Mayhems ago. Father Chuck, thank you.
You're welcome.
And you always pause. I'm just like, is he going to jump on this?
Awkward pause. Hold on. Okay, I got to prepare for mine. Go ahead.
And Matt was here too. Anyway, so join us again next time.
I'm out. I'm dead.
No, Matt, thank you. Thank you for joining us for the first time in a while. We're glad to see that you're okay and that you don't have coronavirus, supposedly.
I didn't. By the way, hold on. Let me throw in this 10-second thing. JP and Chuck decided it would be funny to make a joke that I missed the episode because I had the coronavirus.
I heard it.
I then came home from work with 101.6 degree fever, at which point work made me go get tested for the coronavirus. And I have been, during my 4 days off, stuck in my room waiting for results just to find out the day before I go back to work anyway that they're negative. So, yay, I don't have it.
All right.
But Father Chuck and JP single-handedly wiped out my 4 days off with my family so that I could lock myself in a room and then cry because tomorrow I get to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and start over again. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just glad you don't have it because now I don't look like a jerk.
You read between the lines and you say goodnight. It's okay. Go ahead. Carry on.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, listen to us on all your whatever platforms. Join us again next week. Hopefully, listen to Nevermind by Nirvana. And good journey.
Good journey.
Good journey.